letters, and we talked about it on the phone. But how you really feel about it, I don't really know.
What's your take on captivities? 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 Misogynist. Genius. Misogynist. Genius. Misogynist. Genius. Misogynist. Genius. What's your take on captivities? What's your take on captivities? What's your take on...
Welcome to There's Sometimes a Buggy, Irresponsible Opinions About Classic Film, Coronavirus Edition. I'm Elise.
I'm Dave. This week, we're re-entering Fear and Cinemagoing in Toronto
With
mode,
an emphasis on the fear.
and a de-emphasis, unfortunately, on the cinema-going for the foreseeable future. All of our favorite repertory houses are now shut down in the interests of protecting the public from pandemic.
Our last day of movie-going was...
4 Nights of a Dreamer.
Right, and the night before that, our last day at any other Cinemathèque beside the Lightbox was Peggy Sue Got Married at the Revue. And they went quickly from 50% seating capacity measures to shutting it all down. We actually walked all the way to the Lightbox, which is fine. We like to walk. We like to get our exercise, but we walked all the way to the Lightbox today, only to be turned away.
Although refunds were promptly offered, we have some assurances that they are planning to reopen in mid-April. Hopefully that will be true and everyone will be safe by then.
Even the economy.
Sure, I hope so.
Uncertain times. Deeply uncertain times.
What better thing to do than curl up with a good podcast and listen to us wrestle with the oeuvre of Angela Schanelec this week.
Podcast and carry on.
So we've decided we're going to discuss a couple of films in depth. Schanelec's 2 most recent films, which are The Dreamed Path from 2016 and I Was at Home But from 2019. We will touch on all of the other films that she made starting in 1994 because we did see them all in happier days when Toronto was able to attend movie screenings at will.
What was the programmer's name again, who also did the Ackerman?
Andrea Picard.
That's correct. Andrea Picard was the one who treated us to this.
She may be our favorite TIFF programmer.
Maybe. It remains to be seen, because that third mini retrospective we were going to go to has now been postponed.
That one's gone, yeah.
Oliver Lax.
Yeah.
Now, Dave, you took to these movies a lot.
Like a duck to water.
You did. I, on the other hand, am still struggling with them. I found them really interesting to watch and to think about, but I think they've uncovered something about my way of viewing movies for me, which is that if I don't at least have some idea, however incorrect, about what a director is trying to accomplish, then I don't know how to process my experience of a film. So I am still completely struggling with these films.
That's fair enough. I'm not sure that I have a good idea of how to discuss them at all.
This will be interesting.
I really enjoyed watching them. I came away and today we rewatched these 2 films and I, again, was mesmerized and quite moved by them, but we'll see if I'm able to offer any coherent thoughts.
Or any thought that can be formulated in language. Yeah, we chose a tough one here. The other reason we decided to do this filmmaker, do an episode on this filmmaker, is precisely because she hasn't received a lot of critical attention, at least in English, so far, so she's under-theorized, but that also means we don't have that much to bounce off of in terms of other people's ideas. It has been helpful that we have been seeing all these Bressons.
He appears to have been a major influence, by her own admission.
Certainly on her... Well, let's start with that. He's been a major influence on her conception of acting.
Right.
Which even becomes a topic within her films sometimes, like in I Was at Home But, as it does in his films sometimes.
Sure.
As in A Gentle Woman, which we recently saw.
Yeah.
Which also, there's another tie between those two films, which is Hamlet, a performance of Hamlet. He's also an influence on, somewhat relatedly, to her, on her decision to not always film people's faces, to give a little love to other body parts.
The synecdochic style.
Although Bresson seems incredibly obsessed with hands, and Schanelec seems to have gone for the feet. There's quite a lot of hands too, but there's particularly a lot of feet.
Sure.
And a lot of torsos, I was noticing, whereas Bresson is more into the legs.
And the derrière.
Of his teenage female protagonist,
Yes, we will talk about that.
Or that might be all that needs to be said.
In Fear and Cinemagoing, the current events edition at the end of this episode.
So Schanelec's story is that she was a theater actress, and then, in what I like to think of as a persona moment, suddenly completely lost interest in acting and decided to start making films instead. And when she started making films, one of her inspirations was Bresson. Pickpocket was the first one that she saw, which I guess gave her a real aesthetic revelation. She didn't know movies could be made that way. So what she saw herself as doing in cinema was completely different than, and possibly at odds with, what she had been doing as an artist in the theater.
Well, I would think so.
Including even her own acting in cinema.
Right.
But her films, interestingly, retain a relationship to theater. As we were talking about, there's a production of Hamlet of sorts in her latest film. She was also married to, and this becomes important background to the latest film as well, she was married to a very highly regarded and prolific German theater director, Jürgen Gosch.
Okay.
And they do have children together. He seems to have been about 20 years older than her, and he died in 2009.
So they were together until his death?
Yes. And so obviously that informs the subject matters of I Was at Home But, however, that was made 10 years after his death.
Sure, well, that's not unusual.
Well, it's not, I'm just saying it's not an immediate reaction.
No, she spent some time reflecting on what it feels like.
And to me, on this reviewing of the two films, I felt like I Was at Home But was very strong. I had a very good reaction to it this time, rather than just the sort of bemused head-scratching of my first viewing.
Well, I had a very strong reaction to both of them.
To both of them, okay. Well, what do you want to start talking about?
Well, we'll go chronologically, no? Dream Path.
Oh, okay, not her whole filmography, just the two we watched today.
The others we'll just refer to in passing if the occasion arises. So the Dreamed Path, we saw this one second. Actually, we saw her student films, then we saw her first feature film, then we saw the Dreamed Path. That's how Andrea Picard programmed it. So this one came very early in the Schanelec cycle for us as viewers.
Gave us a foretaste.
And then we revisited it today. Having seen all the rest of her oeuvre in the interim, I'm not sure it changed my opinion all that much. I mean, I was impressed with it right away. I guess a few extra things did come into focus.
So, something distinctive about Schanelec's filmmaking that doesn't have anything to do with Bresson is the fact that, and this is something the critical commenters on her so far have noted, that it proceeds by bifurcation. That usually there are two focal points in her films. Almost like two storylines, right? But they play off each other thematically in ways that aren't obvious on the surface.
The Dreamed Path, however, does start out kind of solidly with the two most important protagonists, although others will then enter the fray later.
And I find it curious that Schanelec is never, because of this bifurcated plot thing, never talked about in the same breath as David Lynch. Maybe he's too popular for the kinds of critics who are talking about Schanelec, too mainstream to evoke, but to me that seems to be one of the obvious connections between them, the other being the very odd way in which their characters behave.
Sure.
The performance style, I should say.
No, I think they are both linked through kind of transcendentalist approach to narrative as well.
You'll have to unpack that for us.
We'll do that as we go along. This film begins with two young adventurers who are spending some time in Greece during the early 80s. So they are involved in the movement that would eventually lead to the European Union after the fall of the Berlin Wall, and countries were really able to coalesce as they did for a while. Now, obviously, that's all starting to fall apart.
What? Sorry, when was the Berlin Wall?
89. Yeah, so...
89. So, yeah, this is the very, very beginning.
Yeah, it's a student unrest or student hopefulness that would lead to...
It's not actually a protest, it's a...
celebration.
Or they're talking about wanting this to happen.
Europa.
They want something to happen, they don't not want something to happen.
No, exactly. So they're bright-eyed young kids, they're folk singers, they sing a duet of The Tokens, The Lion Sleeps Tonight.
They do.
And all of this wonderful stuff, this wonderful youthful adventure kind of collapses very quickly because he gets on the...
Literally collapses.
Yeah, he gets on the payphone, falls down, and we learn that his mother has had a terrible accident.
Now, this is all very odd because, and this is a feature of Schanelec's films, that there are often very complicated social relationships, family and friends that are counterintuitively related to each other's lives, and she makes no effort whatsoever to make it clear what those relationships are or many details about them. Because later we find out through Thomas's interactions with his father, it sounds like they haven't seen each other in years, right? So who called him on the payphone, and how did they know where to reach him?
In 1981, he probably was still a fairly fresh-faced young kid who was still in touch with his parents a little bit. 8 years later, he is no longer such.
Oh, so you think a time jump occurs there?
Well, it does because...
So the mother, he doesn't directly go home and find his mother dying as a result of this accident?
His mother's been probably in a coma for 8 years because we know 100% he is hearing newscasters talking about the Berlin Wall and stuff like that.
So that's the next detail. I mean, you've got to be more historically informed about Europe than I am in order to be able to catch these placements within time.
Yeah, so at that point they have split off. The stories have bifurcated. The events that occur with him at the hospital are happening at the exact same time surrounding her acceptance into the school, because that's also 1989.
Right.
But they haven't seen each other in years either, presumably. And
no, and there is a child that has appeared. There's a very slight reference when she meets her child at the elementary school to tell him that they're going to Berlin. He asks where Grandma is, and we have met her mother.
Yes.
So I'm going with you, not with Grandma, which suggests that this is a single mother, and that her own mother has been highly involved in raising this child. He is the child of Kenneth, you said the protagonist's name was?
Yeah, she introduces him to her mother. This is Kenneth.
There you go.
So, a really important thing about this pair, who are separating now and will not be reuniting, although they will come back together in a strange way at the end of the film, they always have their uniforms on. There's a temporal fugue at the heart of this story.
Which doesn't happen in any of her other films.
No, but this is really calculated to attract my eye and my mind.
The girl is wearing a ridiculous outfit with a stripy shirt and a stripy skirt that don't match each other, so that there's no attempt to obfuscate the fact that she is wearing this Scooby-Doo uniform for
30 years.
30 years, yeah. And there's even slight, I don't know why she chose to do this, but they do have slight aging makeup on at the end.
Yeah.
So that it's not perfect, but they haven't aged appropriately or realistically.
Well, Kenneth looks really fucked up in the final scenes because he is a heroin addict.
That's true. She just has a slight bit of aging eye makeup on.
Yeah. But he too is wearing his uniform, which goes back to the initial scenes, which is a gray sweater.
True. And that is helpful for the scenes where she decides to shoot only his torso, because you can still recognize him. Now, he kind of is like Shaggy in Scooby-Doo, not only in the way he looks and always wears the same outfit, but he does have a dog companion in the later scenes.
Yes, the dog is kind of foreshadowed because there is a very sympathetic dog on hand when he falls down.
Schanelec becomes very interested in her more recent films, so I guess the ones in the 2000s, the later 2000s I should say, and the 2010s. Becomes very interested in shooting children and animals, as approaching her aesthetic ideal of acting.
The Bressonian ideal, yeah.
Yeah. So the breaking point, the Mulholland Drive style breaking point where we switch from our first set of protagonists to our second, occurs when she shows up at the elementary school, tells her son they're going to Berlin, and they set off through the woods, her carrying a packed bag, as if they're going to freaking walk to Berlin or something. And then all of a sudden, in the middle of an enchanted looking path, she decides to lie down and take a snooze.
Right. And this is presumably happening at the exact same time, or just about the exact same time, that Kenneth is lying down in a grave that he's digging.
Sure.
After he and his father have euthanized the mother with morphine.
There's a kind of echo there. Or maybe sympathetic connection. Although there's no direct cut to verify that.
No, there definitely isn't, but I do feel like it's kind of setting you up to feel like there is this lifelong connection between them that the movie may intend to frustrate at the end. That is a spoiler. So, at that point, we start to meet other people, and most notably, a couple.
Maximum confusion.
With a child, a young girl.
Maximum confusion is introduced here to make sure that you don't too easily catch who these people are, where they are, or how they relate to anything else in the film. But the first thing we see is a woman wearing headphones, playing a game, or starting to play a game, or build some kind of toy with her daughter. And she too decides to lie down and take a nap spontaneously.
That's true. Later on, we see her in a police uniform.
Yeah, and the first time I watched this, I was very confused about why we were suddenly watching a policewoman get a hairdo.
Right, well...
At the hairdressers in her uniform.
It does become clear right at the end, if it wasn't clear earlier, that she is an actress. So she is on some kind of TV show or film playing a police officer.
But I cannot overemphasize how little shit Schanelec gives as to making any of this clear. Like the way things are cut so that you're not sure where anyone is in space. There's nothing to establish the space or the other characters, either visually or verbally.
No. As we get into the domestic life of this pseudo-policewoman and her husband and child.
You're not going to talk about the toilet paper scene?
Oh, sure,
like,
of course.
What the hell is going on there? Don't try to rationalize this stuff too much and pretend like it's all clear and straightforward. So they start seemingly filming a scene where this policewoman moodily walking over dunes like she's been thrust into an Antonioni movie, but she's got toilet paper trailing out of the back of her policewoman outfit, and they just keep shooting this forever.
Well, a production assistant finally comes and takes it away.
Yes, but then she keeps walking as if this is either reality somehow, or as if they're just going to film the whole scene this way? Is this actually not a mistake? Is this somehow a film within a film?
It might be. You can't tell.
Or, I don't know, film within... Does that work? I don't even know what to call it. All remarkably strange, and also the movie's first joke, which is kind of like a joke in a church, what with the atmosphere of tableau-like stillness and absolute bleakness.
Right, well, it does come on the heels, or not long after all of the scenes with the morphine and the euthanasia, so that is pretty intense.
Mm-hmm.
When we do see her back at home, we find out that she does not love her husband anymore, and she wants out of the marriage. She asks him to help her.
Before that, we see him, I think that's him taking off in a taxi, but there's like several scenes in between that and our first introduction to him.
That is the atmosphere between them anyway. They are at the end of their marriage. They've been sticking it out, I guess, for the sake of the child, but now...
Just scenes with her doing her acting and something about a lunchroom, meeting everybody in the cafeteria.
Yeah, well, she doesn't want to go home, clearly. She's finished all of her shooting for the day, and she says that she's staying on set to eat, presumably because she doesn't want to go home and face her husband that she's not in love with anymore.
Maybe all the business with the books takes place between that next plot point that you're talking about. So talk about the books, the library.
Yeah, well, that is amazing. She is wandering...
The movie's second joke.
...around a library, kind of in a stupor, presumably seeking some kind of enlightenment or glimmer of hope from literature. We don't really find out what book it is, but she is so drawn to one of them. It happens to be behind glass, and we only learn about it after she has smashed through the glass. And an attendant comes over, very understanding librarian, who says, don't worry, I'll I'll get a broom. Here's your book.
She says, I just wanted that book.
Yeah.
And he hands it to her.
So he respects that kind of dedication, that enthusiasm for literature, and hands it over to her. She's wearing, at points, a Milky Way shirt.
That's later. So this book has something to do with, it's a book of photography and it has tropics.
Oh yeah, is that the book that she gets from behind the glass?
Yeah, I think so, yeah. That's the first one she starts looking at. But when you look at the pictures, they don't look particularly tropical.
Well, they're black and white, aren't they?
Yeah, but they all look like savanna or desert or something. But I don't know, maybe that's just I can't see very well, or perhaps I don't comprehend all of what's encompassed by the tropics.
Well, tropic is just a latitude, right?
Yeah,
so
we
there
usually
are all
think of
kinds
it
of terrain.
As jungle, but then later she is wearing jungle pants, jungle leggings with a Milky Way suit, so she's another oddball dresser in this film.
Although she does have many outfits, unlike the first two protagonists that we met, she is constantly changing.
But this is the best outfit that she wears. I want to talk about two individual scenes. This is why I'm thinking of there being so much happening in between meeting the husband and that conversation that they have, because there's a few scenes of the daughter in bed.
Yeah.
And I didn't know what they meant, but after seeing I Was at Home, but we learn a little bit more about how Schanelec thinks about beds. And then there's the scene with the daughter's foot.
Yeah.
Or the shot of the daughter's foot playing with that ribbon. What did you make of that? What was your reaction to it?
It was interesting.
Because I had a pretty strong reaction to it.
Okay, well, let's hear your reaction.
Well, which was just that you don't typically see in a movie little sensual details like that. Like, that is a thing, lying in bed and playing with something with your foot.
Yeah, well,
It's a thing that I have done millions of times and not necessarily did more as a child, but would have contemplated more as a child. As a child, when the very fact that your hands and feet can do anything at all still seems marvelous and miraculous. And so it really awakened a sense memory in me. I'm not sure if it's supposed to be doing anything else.
No, I don't think so. That was my exact response to it.
Yeah, you too, eh? That also made me think she has little details like that in many of her films. The most striking one for me, other one I can think of, is in Afternoon, the one that's based on Chekhov's The Seagull, where the girl is washing out her bathing suit under the outdoor tap. And just, for me, I could smell the lake water. That whole thing because I haven't even gone swimming since I was a teenager, or very much since I was a child, but that whole memory coming back of just smelling the lake water and feeling the wet suit in your hand.
Yeah, it just puts you right there.
There's also a shot or scene, because sometimes her scenes are only a couple of shots in length, or one shot in length. She says that by the time she was filming The Dream Path, her screenplays by filming time were such that every line was a shot. If you can imagine that. And so there's a shot of the mother lying passed out, seemingly, from having drunk what looks like brandy.
Yeah.
Not necessarily passed out, but she's been drinking and she's taking another little snooze.
Anesthetized.
And the daughter comes by, and this seems important for the way that children and parents relate to each other in her next film. The daughter just comes and sits down and looks at her with curiosity and starts playing with her fingers. Starts reading Latin.
It's true, she does.
Is that a connection with Stripy Dress Girl? Because she wants to study Latin and Greek.
Well, she said she wants to, but I don't think that that's what she wound up doing.
She goes to the French school. I don't know what that means, what the French school is. Is it a place where you teach French in Berlin? We don't know.
No, we don't know. I do want to say, despite the chill, I guess, between the two parents here, it does seem to be a pretty nice little family. The husband is very pleasant. He may not be much to look at.
Exactly. You can see why she's bored.
Yeah, but he seems to be very nice. He's a very good father.
Sure.
There's a key moment where he talks about how great she is at soccer.
We do not learn a ton about his inner life.
No, but
although we do get a lot of scenes with him in his new apartment being shown around it.
Yeah, exactly. Crucial to his being in the film at all, because he is right there overlooking the final encounter, a re-encounter between the striped shirt girl and the gray sweater guy.
Sweater man.
So he's got front row seats for that at his new apartment.
There actually isn't Wikipedia. I would quickly look up their names, but there actually isn't a Wikipedia entry for the dreamed path. So,
oh boy.
Wow. Yeah. Sad.
He does have a real bird's eye view of all of that in his bachelor pad.
There's that scene where what do you call them? Not real estate agent.
Guess it's probably an apartment manager.
Sure. Where she shows him the way that
That's amazing.
the blinds go down. And that has an echo later on when the daughter wants to put her blinds down so that she can get some sleep in the middle of the day. She also wants to just drop off to sleep in the middle of the day, but she has a harder time, so she actually has to close the blinds, she thinks.
We follow the daughter on an adventure with her classmates at a swimming pool.
So apparently, Schanelec, she has at least as many detractors as supporters. A lot of people very hostile to her filmmaking. A lot of critics, I mean, of course. One of them, a variety critic by the name of Derek Ellie. He doesn't review her films anymore. I don't know if he still works for Variety, but he reviewed several of them with great scorn and hostility.
Okay.
The usual kind of, she's the art filmmaker, and that's annoying and pretentious, and we hate it.
Right.
That sort of thing. Anyway, she also gets shit from audiences a lot of the time, and apparently she got some shit about this scene from a festival audience with people complaining that her children don't act like normal children. Like, because there is this enormous group, like, it seems like the whole class, an enormous group of children with no apparent parental supervision.
It's like Peanuts.
Who just all decide to swim together in a very cooperative and calm fashion. So to process this, the first time I saw it, I just made the assumption, but there's nothing to base this assumption on, that it was a swimming class. To explain why they were all behaving so nicely and all swimming as opposed to screaming and splashing each other or whatever.
You can bring any kind of narrative support to it that you want.
Or you can just accept it as incredibly dreamlike.
Yeah, but there is this boy off to the side who you get the sense would love to be swimming with them, and he wants to do it so much that he throws himself into the pool even though he doesn't have the use of his legs at the moment.
Now, were you not very afraid for him in this giant crowd of children? No matter how well behaved they are? I was very afraid for him the first time. I thought he might get humiliated and or hurt physically.
I didn't think he would get humiliated, but I thought he might drown if people didn't come to help him. But he's such a good swimmer that he's able to use his arms alone to get across to the other side of the pool.
And then, weirdly...
he cuts his knee.
Oh, did he cut his knee just then?
Well, that's what I thought. He jumped into the pool, but his legs don't really function at the moment, so they dragged against the side of the pool.
See,
and
to
he
me,
cut it.
this was another completely surreal detail.
Well, it's a fresh cut.
That's true, but everything is so strange in this scene that who cares?
Yeah.
I thought the film was trying to tell me that those bruises on his knees were the reason that he was in the wheelchair, but your penchant for filling in whatever a film doesn't show you with your own thoughts is actually paying off well with Schanelec films.
Well, she leaves a space for me, and I dive right in.
Anyhow,
just like that kid.
But then the strangest detail of all occurs, which is...
a little vampirism.
Well, no, not at all. Quite the opposite. Quite the opposite.
I'm just kidding.
I think that this girl tries to heal him. Upon the suggestion of an onlooker, this girl tries to heal his wounds by licking them.
A little Christ-like beneficence here.
Yeah, and that's interesting considering the little girl in I Was at Home But, who's always bending down and servicing people's feet.
Mm-hmm.
Christ-like little girl. So this is the little girl who is the daughter.
Yeah, who's good at soccer, we find out.
We do find that out.
Because she gets injured. There's a bunch of injuries.
A lot of accidents, a lot of injuries, a lot of falls, a lot of naps.
Yeah, it's true.
So, I guess that's the next big event that happens, other than the fact that we start seeing Kenneth, sweater guy, in his homeless state.
Yeah, I mean, he's been on this trajectory. Like, he started out so bright-eyed and...
But he's already a heroin addict at the time. Yes, his father asks him, are you still doing drugs?
Yeah, 1989.
Yes, but he's already a heroin addict at the time. We see him with his dying mother, and he's apparently been alienated from his parents that whole time.
Yeah, well, his mother's been in a coma for 8 years. That's what we have to presume. It probably knocked him off course.
This is what started his addiction.
I think so, because he doesn't seem to be a heroin addict when they are on their backpack tour of Greece.
True.
And we see, I really like this actor. We see him in some really vulnerable moments crying at a diner as he tries to eat this Grand Slam breakfast.
Yeah.
And singing as his father euthanizes his mother. I mean, all the stuff at the end.
Well, I mean, particularly considering he has to play this character as a hollowed out shell of a grieving heroin addict.
It's really good.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know if the movie works as well as it did on me if you don't find this guy really tragic.
Sure. What are we going to think? He's a comic?
I don't know.
So I looked this up, and the character's name's Sweaterman is Kenneth, and here on IMDb, and Therese is Stripey Girl.
Yeah.
And interestingly, Ariane is the name of...
Maren Eggert, who is Schanelec's muse at this point. She's been in many films.
Yeah, since, well, when is the first one?
I think it's Marseille, isn't it?
In 2004? Yeah, I think so. But Ariane is also the name of the character...
In the first feature film.
In her first feature...
The very verbal sister.
My Sister's Good Fortune. Same name, but very, very different character and different actress.
Yeah.
Alright, back to... So yes, as I said, we see Kenneth wandering around now in his homeless state.
He has a dog, a trusty friend.
And eventually, Therese does come across him.
Well, they wind up crossing paths, yeah. And
what is she doing? She's getting some kind of physiotherapy?
Yeah. So this is where the little Altman-esque shortcuts between the lives actually happen here. She is getting maybe slip discs manipulated or something. It's like a full body.
This happens right after. Okay, so another thing that Schanelec takes from Bresson, which I find actually kind of ridiculous in Bresson, later Bresson, is that he will only use diegetic music.
Right.
Obviously, he doesn't start out that way in his filmmaking. It's scored, well, either scored or he uses classical music, at least up to...
Country Priest.
Well, and O Hazard Balthazar doesn't use much music at all, but it does use that classical piece at the end. The Mozart, I think it is.
Yeah.
His theory becomes to never use anything but diegetic music, which can become very distracting and obvious in his films. More distracting than if he just used non-diegetic music. But here, she makes use of that. There's a scene where the daughter turns on some kind of modern pop tune I'm not familiar with, but it's very lush and very cathartic in this otherwise tense and silent movie.
Mm-hmm.
And it feels like you're about to have an emotional release based on the music alone. There is a bit of a dancing scene, but not her usual kind, and I Was at Home But prior to these more recent films, most of her films featured a dancing sequence that is
euphoric,
and by far the only euphoric thing occurring in these films.
Yeah.
So here you have that music, and then that music switches over into, it's also being played diegetically in this scene of physiotherapy taking place in the hospital with Therese, and this is how Therese gets reintroduced, although we've already seen Kenneth wandering around.
Right, and Therese is seeing the same doctor that has been helping the little girl who is good at soccer. It's the same guy.
So this is all after the girl's accident, I guess.
Yeah, so that's where their paths cross again, and then Therese is out walking in the city. This is some kind of public square.
Yeah.
Which again is just under the window of the new bachelor, the dad of the soccer girl, and Kenneth is camped out there.
His dog.
Looking very down and out. He's got a little hat set up.
I don't know if he's still taking heroin, if he's nodding off half the time.
Yeah.
Or just downtrodden.
And, I mean, these scenes are heart-wrenching, right? And you don't know, well, the first time I saw it, I had no idea which way it was going to go. Is there going to be some kind of incredible reconciliation between them? There certainly is not, but there is an intense scene of recognition. And
then she walks on. So since you were very emotionally involved in this film, probably more than I was, what do you make of that scene? It's quite cruel.
Well, yes, in its effects, it is very cruel. I don't think that she is being cruel. I think she is completely dazed and unable to process what is happening. This is the father of her child she hasn't seen since the early 80s,
Oh,
presumably.
that actually the fact that they have a child together totally slipped my mind in that scene, because she looks the same. She particularly looks the same.
Yeah, again, they are 30 years older than they were when they were singing The Lion Sleeps Tonight, but they are still outfitted the same way.
She has the same haircut.
Yeah. So they're the same people. Nobody changed changes. Everyone is what they are from the beginning of time, and it's only some accidents or cruelties of fate that move us in certain directions, but they don't change essentially what we are. And we get even some talk about that in the first film, My Sister's Good Fortune, where the characters say that they don't change, they won't change, and they don't want each other to change.
Very different from the optimistic discussions of change sometimes occurring. Very optimistic, especially considering her life occurring in Ackerman's films.
Right, no, this is very different. People are self-contained, moving, they're monads, let's say.
Sure. They only appear to be interacting, they're really just unfolding their own nature in patterned ways in the same space.
Very Emersonian, very much in the vein of Emerson's experience, where everything is just out of reach of the self.
Okay, so we have a little discussion about this at the very end when the actress is being interviewed.
Yes.
So everything comes together. I guess we won't spoil everything that happens.
Yeah, we will. Why not?
Well, we usually do.
Yeah.
Kenneth's body has been taken away. His dog is still there.
Oh, it's so rough, man.
He is empty. We don't actually see him be removed, do we?
No. He's just gone. The hat is still there, and the poor dog is getting rained on. Obviously, no one cares about this dog or is going to do anything for this dog, Kenneth is completely gone.
We're seeing some of this initially, I think, from the dad's bachelor pad.
Yeah. And then it's sort of going on in the background of this interview with the actress.
And it's raining and blowing hard.
She's under an umbrella and talking about her artistic process and the lonely life of the artist, and he's meanwhile dead, presumably.
Well, I don't think it is the lonely life of the artist, because we get a teacher or somebody making a similar kind of speech in I Was at Home, but she tries to explain herself to the interviewer, and the interviewer gives an account of acting being conversational, and she says, No, I don't think that's quite it. Answering in a very David Lynch character kind of way to a proposition, right? No, I don't think that's quite it.
No, it's an unfolding of the self through time.
She talks about her solitude and how acting doesn't cure her solitude, which did make me think about Harold Bloom, who does talk about American solipsism in Emerson and other writers.
And Whitman. She contains multitudes, but the multitudes do not interact with the multitudes.
They interact with each other, perhaps, but not with others. So it doesn't make her any less lonely. And then she starts talking about how she was an only child, never had a brother or sister. And honestly, I think that sets up the next film.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
About whether having siblings or children can modify your loneliness in any way.
Yeah, it makes sense. Yeah.
That's what I was thinking about this time, watching them back to back. So shall we start talking about the next one?
No. Because then Therese goes home and her son is getting ready for a backpack trip to Europe with his girlfriend. And this, again, amps up all of the totally frustrated potential catharsis that we almost experience there. I mean, all of this is preying on her mind as she gets home and hands over a backpack to these people who are going to maybe replicate the whole tragedy as they go
Right,
off.
I forgot that took place. That's the final scene?
Well, the final scene, except for one, which is...
the interview was the final, wasn't it? No?
Either way, they're all happening right near the end. But the last scene we see with Therese is her seeing her son off on this adventure after she has walked right by Kenneth because she doesn't know what to do with the information that she has learned. Then the final scene is many, many shots of the daughter kicking a soccer ball. She's recovered.
That's right.
And that is, I guess, the same thing that an actress is doing, right? Like, she is just really good at this, and she is unfolding her greatness in her chosen domain, which is kicking a soccer ball.
Right, and we've seen her
It's kind of a euphoric scene.
She is very resilient throughout this whole movie, as we see her dealing with her mother's ennui.
Yeah.
As the relationship breaks up, and we see her dealing with her father leaving, and we see her, and maybe her accident is some kind of acting out of this. It could be interpreted that way. Acting out in response to all of this. Because it does happen while her father's at home, and she's using a ladder, which presumably she should not be doing. And then, she has her trip to the hospital, but she gets through all of this, and she is the triumphant final image that at least somebody, for now, is okay. That's all the reassurance we get, really.
True, but she seems really gleeful as she lays into that ball.
Yeah, but he seemed pretty okay and happy too when he was doing his basketball while his mother was dying. People doing things physically seems to provide moments of joy that their actual lives and thought processes do not in Schanelec's movies.
Yeah, I guess the basketball scene, that's a little moment of respite for him, but he's also right around that same time talking about how God has left him and
was that
crying.
He was having a conversation with his dealer? That was his dealer? No.
Well,
who is that? Because that was around the time he was getting the morphine.
I don't know who that guy is. I thought he was a hospital employee who was sympathetic to...
Like a respite or home care person?
Yeah, that's what because he was helping them with the IV unit and stuff.
So this is a legal euthanasia?
Presumably. Nobody went to jail. Euthanasia is probably fine in many European countries.
Yeah, I don't know. We did not look that up, but yeah, it appears to be legal.
I guess we can move on to the next film. Obviously, there's a lot more to say about this. If we watched it a few more times, we'd have even more coherent things to say, probably. Let's move on to her most recent film, I Was at Home, But, which is a kind of an echo of an Ozu-type title.
Now, I will fully admit that if I had not read synopses of this film in reviews and press material, I would have had no idea what its main plot was.
Really? Okay.
I would not have known, maybe after several viewings, I would have understood that this was a son who came home, that was what starts everything off, but I would never have known that he was camping out in the woods.
Well, they kind of show that right at the beginning, that he's coming back from...
Well, he's coming back from a road.
Yeah.
This doesn't give me any information about camping.
Doesn't it kind of remind you of the beginning of Four Nights of a Dreamer?
No, it reminds me of... The whole setup reminds me of Twin Peaks, actually. The first episode of Twin Peaks.
Okay.
A child who was lost comes wandering back, sets off a bunch of freaked out reactions in his school that, everybody from the students performing Hamlet to the completely befuddled teachers who are having late night meetings about him are reacting to this.
But what happens in Twin Peaks that's anything like that?
Oh, what's her face? Renette. Renette returning back from the railroad.
That doesn't happen at the beginning of Twin Peaks.
No, I'm conflating the two things. The schools freak out when they hear about Laura Palmer's death and her return.
Oh, okay. But he's not as damaged as Renette Pulaski.
No,
thankfully.
He's pretty damaged, though. He has surgery for sepsis at one point.
Yeah, that's true. What else?
Is that his sister that he passes?
Yeah.
On his way back?
I think so.
Yeah, me too. I think so. Although they don't exchange any acknowledgement of recognition.
But they're very close siblings.
They are?
This is a really great sibling movie.
I don't know if... Okay, yeah, the children do have a few lines of dialogue, but although we see them constantly interacting with each other, both the two siblings and the kids at school, we almost never hear them talking to each other.
Well, he sings Moon River to her.
So they retain a very enigmatic quality for the viewer.
Yeah.
But no, the very beginning of this movie is the animals.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. Amazing. It's a dog chasing a rabbit at first, and then there's an ellipsis. We have a donkey who seems to be kind of the Rod Serling of the piece, introducing the film. The dog later joins the donkey in their barn. They've taken over. They're squatters.
Yeah, sure. Schanelec says she got this idea from a German folktale of some kind about animals living in a house together.
Yeah, it's amazing. I love it. So the dog is eating the rabbit. That's hard to watch, of course, for a lover of rabbits like myself, but that's what dogs do. And the donkey is just taking it all in.
Just being a very calm presence. Then the donkey walks over to the window and looks out while the dog comes and sleeps beside him. And the dog, this carnivorous beast that we've seen, is...
The image of comfort and...
No, that's not what I read at all.
Oh.
Quite the opposite. He seems to be sleeping very fitfully. He's breathing very heavily like he's having a dream. And I thought maybe he was having a really meaty dream. And that the dream was the film that we're about to see.
Interesting. I thought he looked beatifically at peace after his day.
That's hilarious. No, because he's breathing so hard. Like when a dog breathes like that when they're sleeping, that usually means they're dreaming.
Yeah, they love those dreams, though.
But usually the dream them as something anxious, like they're chasing or being chased.
I don't know. We'll have to watch it again.
But especially in contrast to the donkey, who is so peaceful and not breathing heavily at all. Now, you can, obviously, as you can see here, this is a very enigmatic bookend framing device. These animals that are not in any way, they don't appear anywhere else in the film. It can be interpreted, you can bring anything to it.
But
obviously.
The donkey obviously has an observational bent. He's like the watcher, and
I thought they were a watcher and a dreamer.
When he looks out the window, presumably he sees the boy coming home.
Maybe, or he sees everything.
Because they're in the woods. They're in this weird house in the woods, and the boy's coming back through the woods into town.
Perhaps.
The donkey notes all of this and spools out some theories.
There's no shot to confirm that.
No.
They could be disconnected. They could be in another country.
Well, they could be on another plane of reality.
I think they are. That's what it feels like mostly.
Yeah.
But that wasn't her intention. She just proceeds, like David Lynch or whoever, she just proceeds completely intuitively.
Then we are introduced to this family unit. It's a single mother.
Now, at first I didn't know, because we do just follow this family for the majority of the film. I was looking for the bifurcation, but in this case it's between the family and the school, which is what was making me think of Twin Peaks.
There is that couple.
They're connected to the school.
Yeah.
I think they might both be teachers, or one is anyway.
And they also run into Maren Eggert and the kids, I think. They're all there at the museum.
Yes.
Because we see those guys, the couple, the blonde.
The sweater guy and the blonde girl.
Yeah. They are at the museum as well, looking at painting. They do have a long philosophical conversation, not far from the end, where we learn a little bit more about what's going on with them, because they're not major characters until that point. They're just kind of standing around in the background. But then we hear that she has this image of what life is all about, her mission, which is to just be alone.
We'll get to that later. But yeah, for me, it was the interplay between, because this is where the constant cutting happens, between the school, which means the teachers, and the children's zombie-like performance of Hamlet, and
they're rehearsing for it throughout the film.
Yeah, or performing it as their class project. We don't know. Again, we see the teachers, but the teachers are completely separate from the students. In the classroom scenes, we only see students.
Yeah, the teachers are all in the lounge.
All day and night long, seemingly.
Yeah, what a great school. Everyone's very dedicated. Parents show up and they have a little conversation about what's to be done, about truants.
So we see, what's her name? Let's find out.
Maren Eggert.
Yeah, what's her name though? Astrid. So after her son is returned to her, what happens first with Astrid? Well, we get right into the bike plot.
She tells the daughter, I'm getting a 10-speed silver bike. Daughter says, I'm just gonna stay here. You go get it by yourself.
I'm not interested in your bike adventure. I'm gonna do my homework, it looks like.
Very interesting, very compelling series of scenes with this bike dealer.
Well, like the previous film, we had a very sick person who dies. We had accidents, several accidents, and we had the disabled boy at the pool. So she seems to be, not in a Lynchian way, but again, like David Lynch, to be very interested in featuring disability, because she's very interested in bodies, and as we find out in a long speech in this film, in how and whether bodies can tell the truth.
So we do have her encounter with the bike dealer.
Although this disability involves the voice.
Yeah, so he must have had some kind of surgery on his vocal cords, and he needs a machine that electronically generates a voice that doesn't sound like anything to me, but apparently...
Yeah, to me, I would assume that there would have to be German subtitles for what he's saying, but she can hear him, understand him fine.
Yeah, so that gets into a bit of surreality there.
She gets the bike and all appears to be well, except for the slight surreality from the point of view, from an ableist point of view of the encounter. And he also seems like he is maybe living on a disability pension. He looks a little rough.
Sure, well, he's got quite a challenge.
Yes.
In life. But I guess he fixes up bikes and sells them as a sideline, and she seems very satisfied with this bike. It's refurbished. It works great on the trial run. She sets out into the city on her bike. Doesn't take long for it to malfunction, but it doesn't happen right away, because she takes it to the school and everything goes off without a hitch.
There's some kind of scene, isn't there, where she's watching that guy's movie? Because she goes to see a movie or a theater event and she leaves early, and that's when she comes home and finds her son singing to the daughter and singing in a way that is, well, literally voice breaking. So again, something to do with voice.
Yeah.
In this film, his voice is changing and he's like way out of tune singing this song to his sister to sleep. And it's in English too, like Lion Sleeps Tonight.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to think what this movie really is all over the place. It's not following any kind of plot thread. At a certain point, she makes her thematic speech to the teachers. She shows up at the teacher's lounge.
Yes.
I guess that's after we see them having an all-night meeting talking about the boy, them not by name, talking about what they're supposed to do with him. It's not at all clear what that refers to, but in reviews, I've seen it explained as they're trying to decide, I guess, whether to suspend him.
It was clear this time, because they're basically saying, look, this is an offense. This is like an impeachable offense he's committed. They don't really want to do anything to him, but they feel like they have to have some kind of reprimand because otherwise everyone's gonna go off and do this kind of crazy stuff. But presumably they really like this kid, and this is the first bad thing he's ever done, so they're trying to find the exact medium way to...
And it's the middle of the night, and they can't seem to come to a decision and go home.
It's like a hung jury.
People are falling asleep.
Yeah.
And that's when we first see Beardy Guy go outside and call his blonde girlfriend, although we don't see her at this point.
Yeah, so they're deadlocked on this.
Then we don't see any resolution, but we also don't see anything happen to the boy.
No, I think he just goes back to school and everything's fine.
And starts playing Hamlet.
Yeah.
And then all of this is interspersed with the children performing Hamlet, not only in the classroom, but sometimes in the woods.
Yeah, I think that's just rehearsals, open air rehearsals. So much of the film is centered on the experience, the kind of fraying nerves of this single mother who's been widowed.
Yeah, but we don't learn that till at least midway. So at first we just see all we know about the pressures that are on her is about this child having run away, I guess.
Mm-hmm. And the bike frustration.
And that's kind of a displacement.
Yeah, exactly.
So then, she has her bike frustration. She tries to return it in a long comic scene.
Yep.
Where it's very hard moment to moment to know who to sympathize with because she seems like an entitled jerk, especially as he continually offers to fix it for her, but also at the same time, she just wants to give this bike away and she can't do it. So it's interesting because this was supposed to be a simple transactional exchange. It really is structured like a comedy routine.
Yeah.
Because this was supposed to be a simple transactional exchange. Do it, buy the bike, it's over. If that doesn't work, then just give it back and it's over. Instead of which he just draws it out and draws it out and draws it out and...
Yeah, he doesn't have the money. He can't refund it. He is trying to offer other alternatives.
Well, it's also very clear that, and it's going to be this huge inconvenience for him. He's going to have to pay money for an ad again. He doesn't even know how to do it himself. He has a helper who's away.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just endless, this story of how complicated this is going to be.
And she's just done with this. She calls the bike junk and accuses him sort of swindling her. She says this is not...
Outright accuses him.
Is not as advertised.
And it's hard to know whether that's true. Who's being reasonable or not here?
Well, I think they're both being true to their own lights here. Obviously, this guy is in a more disadvantaged situation in life, so you do have to sympathize with him a little, but on the other hand...
But is he a swindler?
Maybe, but he's also probably living very, very meagerly, and maybe he needs to swindle a little to get by.
But he is certainly capable and willing to repair it as much as needed.
Yeah, but, balanced against his lower class position, which draws our sympathy, she is the protagonist of the film, or one of them, so we can't help but take her side of it in some ways, as she asks for the manager, basically, and demands restitution.
I mean, I'm ultimately on his side in this, but then eventually she just says, I guess feeling the same way we're feeling about it, like feeling sorry for him, she eventually just says, forget it. I'm gonna leave. You can take the bike and my money.
Yeah, but he does say, I'll send you the money when I get it. And so she gives him her bank account number, and maybe she does get it back. Who knows? Incredible. It's a Wonderful Life kind of scenes where she really scares the kids.
Well, yeah.
Scares the viewers even more than the kids.
Let's not get to that yet. Before that, I can't remember what leads up to that, but we see her visit her husband's grave. Is that before or after that scene?
I think it's before, yeah. And I mean, that is a very beautiful scene.
But I don't know where we learn that the husband is dead, because I only remember learning it when she gives that big long speech to the guy on the bike, which is followed by the blow up in the kitchen. Okay, I don't know the order of any of this.
No, I think that happens earlier. We know that she's at his grave, her husband's grave, and the song starts playing, Let's Dance, David Bowie's Let's Dance, covered by someone that sounded like Frank Black but isn't.
A gentle acoustic version.
Supremely transcendentalist interlude here, where she's got a kind of like a nightingale or something.
Well, I think that was a partridge.
Yeah.
Looked like a little partridge.
A night bird of some kind is communing with her as she communes with...
It's like the children who try to commune with the sleeping, dissociated parent.
Yeah. She's clearly recharging in some way here, because she does seem to be getting something positive out of the experience. And there's also, the song takes us back in memory to a scene at a hospital where she and the kids are dancing.
A choreographed dance scene, which isn't usual in Schanelec.
And you have to imagine that this is when the husband was in the hospital.
Well, yeah, we see a hospital bed.
Right, but you don't see who's in the bed.
No.
There are other ways you could interpret it, but yeah.
No, there's no other ways you could interpret that.
Does seem to be the case, that they are trying to cheer him up as he dies.
Yes.
And doing a good job of it, probably.
Much more... This seems like the most direct reference to grace and catharsis. Much more so than in any of the Bressons we've seen, which is all but 2 now. Much more so than in any of her other films.
Yeah, this does seem to have been quite a wonderful moment for everybody.
We see a starry sky. We see, my God, it's almost Hollywood.
Yeah.
Other than the fact of the weird scene, the weird moment with the little partridge isn't something everybody would think of.
Well, it's romanticism. It is beautiful. Then, as you say, she does... But, you know, that moment might be great. She might be able to return to it at times when she goes out in the night. But it doesn't keep her from freaking out in day-to-day reality.
Well, the scene that leads into that, directly into that, I believe, is the one where
she tells off the professor.
She tells off the filmmaker.
Yeah,
the guy... He's a filmmaker who wants to get a professorship so he can have regular work.
And she likes this guy, but she hates his movies, and she tells him so in no uncertain terms.
She hates one movie.
Yeah, the only movie of his that they talk about, maybe the only movie he's ever made.
And this is interesting because Schanelec has so many wordless scenes and images, and so many scenes that, in a very minimalist way, mimic the patterns of ordinary banal speech, although in such a way that you can tell that it's highly artificial, and deliberately so. But in contrast to that minimalism, she also has Bergman-esque long monologues in her films. Originally, many of them, but more and more just 1 or 2.
Yeah, My Sister's Good Fortune, that character, Ariane, is definitely...
She monologues through the entire film.
Yeah, but she sort of returns in this movie in Astrid's scene with that filmmaker, because that sounds like Ariane dialogue to me, really.
And that actor was so great. What he brings, the energy, the counter energy that he brings, seems like that kind of caricature of an annoying artist guy who is just so zen and so chill, right? That he seems like a complete blank. But it works so well in this scene because he's also turning that on in order to deal with her crazy intensity.
Yeah.
He's like, it's actually kind of working to keep her contained. It seems like she could completely explode if he wasn't being so soothing.
He's quite affable as he takes the blows against his art.
Not just affable, but like non-reactive. But you can see kind of this wariness in his eye.
He is registering what she says and countering it the best he can.
Yeah, so they have a long dialogue of, he has made a film, as best as I can make out, where there are sick people,
dying people,
and actors and dancers all interacting, but in such a way as it's all presented. She says it's all presented as reality or truth. So I'm not able to really grasp what this film would look like. But the point is that she is really upset by the bringing together of acting, which is lies. Her theory of art is purely platonic. Acting, which is sheer lies with, especially theatrical acting, with sick people who are sheer truth.
With death, which is the ultimate truth.
Necessity. Their bodies are showing only what is necessary, or revealing what is necessary.
But obviously right there, she is telling us as well that as much as she likes to reflect back on that dance that she and the kids perform for her dying husband, she feels false when she thinks about it as well. And
you think so?
His death made her feel like a fraud every moment as she tried to cope with it and talk to him.
I wasn't even connecting it with that scene. But it is true that compared to most Schanelec dance scenes, which are not choreographed and which are just the actors or non-actors that she chooses moving their bodies to music, that choreographed scene does seem false and irritating. She's quite right about that.
Well, see, the thing is, you can take it both ways, because I'm sure at the time, it's not like the husband thought it was spontaneous, but it was probably the kind of thing where it was a conspiracy of fun between them, where they were like, let's put on this little show for Dad, it'll put a smile on his face, and it probably did. But in retrospect, she probably goes either way on this. She sometimes thinks of it as a wonderful thing that happened between them all, and other times she probably feels like this was a gigantic lie, and we were all just trying to pretend he wasn't going to be dead in a few days.
And this whole monologue and his minimally reactive reactions, it's hilarious.
Yeah.
And yet frightening.
Carefully calibrated scene that I don't know who else could pull off.
And it is during this scene that she mentions that her husband died.
Yeah.
A couple of years ago, and says that she thinks she's losing her mind. Now, I remember the scene with the children happening right after that, but I'm not sure.
It's around there, yeah. It probably is right after that. She gets home, and they've been using the oven.
No,
the little girl.
it's not right. It might be right after that, but it's not in the film's time right after it, because she comes home with the boy. She's bringing the boy home, so she's been somewhere else.
Oh, at the hospital, probably.
Or it might be another day, because as we mentioned, okay, so there's scenes where the little girl is... We aren't narratively told that a problem has developed with his foot, I guess as a result of his trip in the wilderness.
Yeah.
But we see the little girl bandaging somebody's bloody foot, and then we hear, because some children have shown up at the hospital, we hear that he's in there getting surgery for sepsis.
Yeah.
Which is life-threatening.
Yeah.
So then the mother brings the boy back to the apartment, and the little girl has been using the oven, and fair enough that would make a parent incredibly upset. Like, out of fear.
Yeah.
Like, the anger is coming out of a place of fear.
And she's like, damn you, I told you not to use the oven, make some toast!
Yeah, and I have never seen a scene of domestic anger against children this raw and frightening, other than, as you say, the It's a Wonderful Life scene. But in that one, like, George Bailey is about to go to jail.
Well, in this one...
Well, I guess she's grieving. She's still, obviously, 2 years later, completely shaken up.
Yeah, and her son, as you point out, her
son's reaction has
in a life-threatening situation as well.
Yeah, that's true.
And she's probably wondering, like, what the hell is going on with this family? Son wanders off for a week and gets himself almost killed in the wilderness. I must be a terrible parent. Then she comes home and her daughter's been using the oven.
I love it when she screams, although obviously it's different in German, but I love it when she screams, "Make yourself some toast instead!"
Yeah. And she's also saying, don't act like I'm gonna attack you. I'm not gonna hurt you. I mean, it's so much exactly like what a parental freakout is like. I mean, I don't think experienced things like that.
Sure, we all have.
Yeah.
I don't recall my mother ever being quite this angry when I was a small child. Of course, we weren't dealing with the kinds of things that this woman is dealing with. Not until I was an adolescent and provoked her all the time. But it seems very true. And this is interesting coming close to that scene where she talks about the falseness of acting.
Yeah.
It's almost like Mulholland Drive, like the scene between, Betty's rehearsal, where she takes this absolutely fucking absurd scene that we've seen her play in a really absurd way already, and then just magically through the power of acting and direction makes it seem like the most authentic scene that you've ever seen.
Yeah. And the kids do their best to turn this scene around and comfort her, and she just keeps throwing them off.
That's what I found such an incredible observation about child-parent interactions, that often you do exactly when your parent is most angry and even frightening you, like physically frightening you. The child will doesn't know how to do anything else but to try to repair that bridge, that gap, right?
An instinct that is born into all babies. They try, and younglings, they try to be as cute as they can to restore some sanity to their freaked out parent.
Yeah, not only that though, but just
recall them to their parental responsibilities. You're here to take care of me. Let's remember that here.
Well, I mean, interpreting the fury as a act of abandonment and sort of, like I say, seeking to repair that distance, right?
Yeah.
And the reaction of the parent of, I just want to be angry right now. Can you not just please fuck off for just 30 seconds and let me just be angry? And they won't. They absolutely can't. They can't stand that. Now, on a smaller scale, I used to experience this on a much smaller scale. I used to experience this with my much younger sister, the one who's 15 years younger than me. Because I was a smoker for many years, and I would be, dealing with whatever stressful events of life, of school and work and family and relationships, and trying to have a smoke in the kitchen. And she had this instinct. Anytime I was smoking or anytime I was on the phone, had this instinct that right then she had to come close and cuddle up to you.
Oh, just like the cat when we're podcasting.
And then I would just be, just get off of me. Just get off of me. Just stop touching me. Just wait 5 minutes until I'm done this cigarette and we can go sit down together. But just this thing of wanting some distance from this clinging child.
She doesn't get it. And this scene spills over into the next morning, it seems like, where she actually throws them out of the house because they make noise when he's tickling her and they break something.
Well, Schanelec has talked in interviews about how proud she was of these scenes.
Oh, they're incredible.
Because in most movies, that freak out would be the catharsis, and it would be over and something would change in the relationship.
Nope.
Right away.
Keeps going.
Well, I mean, there's a whole sequence of intense emotion there where, again, the little girl is changing her brother's bandages, and then he starts tickling her, and she seems to be having a good time and giggling.
Yeah.
But then the mother, in reaction to that amount of boisterousness, breaks something, and then the giggles turn into screams.
Yeah.
And then Astrid completely freaks out and furiously throws them out of the house and can't even stand them being on the other side of the door. Has to throw them out of the apartment.
Yeah, they have to be on the street. The dog is terrorized by this. We hear some whimpers.
That was an amazing... I don't know how people direct films. How do they get these scenes to work so perfectly with elements like animals in them? But this dog was reacting to the actor.
There are good acting dogs. I mean, that dog may be a professional.
Well, it may be, or it may have just been reacting to the anger being projected by this actress.
Yeah.
I've seen, actually, I saw a review, I don't remember where, but there was a review being extremely unsympathetic to the Astrid character based on these scenes, basically judging her for not dealing with her grief better.
Well, do they judge George Bailey for terrorizing a whole family? Maybe they do, but...
Maybe, to be consistent. But it is more frightening for viewers to see mothers act this way.
I guess. I did not find this unsympathetic. I found it harrowing, for sure, but I felt terrible for her as she rode out these emotions.
And then again, her new boyfriend is there.
He's watching all of this like the donkey. I mean, he doesn't know what else to do. He just sits there. And
then he tries to soothe her, and they have a soothing, boring conversation about
his rich parents.
His rich parents and his app that his father's going to... What is he going to do, invest in it? Or,
yeah.
Or he has a failing app? I don't know what...
But, he seems like a good guy. He leaves, he high-fives the kids who are sitting out on the stoop. I mean, he seems probably like a good influence in the house that might eventually come to something.
Yeah, but he wisely does not intervene in this.
No, you shouldn't. But, yeah, he does what he can. She's not around, so he does give a little bit of a cheering gesture to the kids.
Now, way earlier on, at one point, there was another thematic speech that she gives when she visits the teacher's lounge, and she starts talking about babbling about her son and his role in the family. And to me, this is the key to the film, this speech here, talking about how she and her life and her daughter's life are in the hands of her son who is transitioning to manhood.
Right.
Because this to me seems like the kind of mixed up, backwards, emotional familial relationship or configuration that you might get in a dream about your family. Because it's obviously completely backwards. The idea that this son, impassive presence in the film with very little
Well, he's very
to say.
gentle, and almost everything we see him do is positive and pleasant.
But he's also done this terrible thing.
Well, the frightening thing. I don't think I would call it terrible.
Sure, but the reaction that it has caused is terrible.
Yeah.
And so he's like this complete enigma. And yet she projects all of this onto him, that somehow he is so special that he alone can save or be the fuel of the family now.
Or its destruction, I guess.
Now that his father is gone, you know?
Yeah.
To me, this is somehow the emotional key of the whole movie.
Right.
And it's important that she is unduly placing this burden on him.
Yeah, and he's clearly weakening under it. I mean, it's causing some problems, but not the usual kinds of problems. He's not acting out in any kind of teenage juvenile delinquent way, but he is kind of sneaking off into the woods to commune with nature. And he's doing it again at the end, and he's taking his sister with him on his back. I mean, are they going for good?
But the mother is there too.
Yeah, she's not in the frame.
They're all there out in the woods at the end, and she's taking a little nap on the moss in the middle of a stream.
Yeah.
Where he starts walking with his sister. I saw someone, I know, I keep mentioning this, but all the reviews I've seen, I don't remember if this might have been Letterboxd or it might have been a review. A professional review. Someone complaining about Schanelec's art house mannerisms and talking about how in this final scene she curbs the natural vitality of the young actor by forcing him to walk as slow as her art movie pretensions need him to move.
That's ridiculous. There would be rocks on the bottom of that river.
And he's recently had sepsis in his foot.
Yeah, he's walking very carefully. That is perfectly naturalistic and also an amazing way to close out your film. Tentative steps.
But also we're terrified every moment that, speaking of burdens, like the literal burden of the child on his back, that they're both going to collapse at any moment, right?
Yeah, and it really is unclear if this is just a little jaunt, a rejuvenating jaunt.
For the whole family.
Yeah, or are they sneaking off to disappear for another week? I mean, probably not, but that option is there.
Now, there's another scene in the teacher's lounge, just kind of a random scene where one of the teachers has brought his baby to work.
Yeah.
And another one is commenting on it, and in the background, two teachers have homemade night outfits on and are fighting a duel.
Sure. Well, they're doing Hamlet stuff at the school, so they're probably getting into the spirit.
I guess, although there's no students present at that time. There's the wandering student with the crown.
Yeah.
Who at some point decides to start working at a grocery store.
Pro bono. Yeah.
Until they chase him away.
Yeah, he hasn't been hired, but he does go to get something from the inventory and gives it to Maren Eggert. It's a case of Perrier water or something like that.
He demands payment for his labor before
that scene is hilarious too.
Walks off.
They just tell him get out over and over again. They give him money, then again get out, and he sulkily strolls off into the woods with his crown. He's like Jughead and faints out there, passes out in the woods.
Well, her characters just love to pass out.
Yeah, and
well, no, it wasn't the woods. It was that park.
Yeah, sure.
The park where we also see the other important scene of the teacher, the bearded teacher,
and the
blonde woman.
Yeah, and she, I guess, goes there a lot because she's the one that finds the crowned child and seems to be ready to do something to intervene in his sad life.
So they have this long, as you say, philosophical discussion about he wants a child very badly and she doesn't want to have them. And she says that it is her mission in life to be alone and lonely, and loving you or having a child, none of that's going to change the fact that I am essentially alone. And I guess she feels like marrying and having a child would be a falsification of this mission.
Yeah, and then he says, that's not a mission, being alone.
It has no goal. It might be a fact, or it might be a feeling, but it's not a mission.
Yeah, I do. I think it's an ontology more than anything. It's not an end, it's a beginning. and it is Emersonian to the core as well. Although Emerson got married and had kids, he just grieved that their deaths didn't actually mean anything to him.
Well, that's a little bit, that's going a bit far.
Well, that's how he puts it. He's like, it only goes so far. It doesn't actually touch the core of my being. I want it to, but it doesn't.
You always object to me when I give that characterization of the essay experience.
It has many, many layers. He is really distraught that that is the truth of his relationship to the universe and to the people that he cares about or wants to care about more than he believes people really can care.
Yeah, well, he may have a false idea of what really caring entails, like an ideal of what that would entail.
Of course.
Like mainly, in other words, if you don't kill yourself upon the death of your son, then you're not experiencing it enough.
Right. Well, I think that is exactly it.
Yeah.
So
you can relate to it, if not to the language he uses to describe it. It's almost too on the nose, the way she reaches out to this child in the end there, as if trying to understand how she could relate to another being, and particularly to a child. It's the first time we see an adult doing that.
Mm-hmm.
Mostly, it's the children reaching out to adults that way.
But this Jughead really needs it.
There's also the swimming pool scene. She loves swimming scenes and swimming pools.
Yeah, no, this was amazing. Just long shots of Maren Eggert swimming back and forth with the daughter standing off. It's a distant shot.
What the hell is she doing? She's adjusting her swim tank, but why?
I don't know.
And why do we care?
She doesn't go in.
But we see her afterwards with the result of this twisted up swim tank.
Yeah. I don't know. It's fascinating, though.
Well, this is why
She's
I'm
just
like...
very uncomfortable, the whole scene.
I wonder if Schanelec, scenes like this and the scene with the little girl in bed with the ribbon and feeling the ribbon that we were talking about, it makes me wonder if Schanelec has a thought process for the children in scenes like that she is not communicating. Like, the children have some kind of logic or something they're thinking about while they're doing this action, but all that's being conveyed to us is the action.
Yeah, and in the first case that you discussed, it was a kind of feeling of well-being and pleasure just at being able to manipulate reality that way. In this case, I think it's the reverse. It's a feeling of utter discomfort.
Maybe.
And not being able to join her mother in swimming those laps. She just is sidelined here, and it goes on forever, and it doesn't really ever lose its interest either. I don't think.
And you notice at the end of it, a dog appears in the window again.
Yeah.
And then there's this scene in the locker room afterwards, where she again goes down on her knees and removes the strap from her mother's ankle.
Yeah.
And then her mother actually embraces her. They go off to the corner of the locker room and sit on a bench and embrace. And again, that gave me the feeling of this sensual feeling of wet bodies and chlorine smells and skin touching, warm skin touching. You know, it was a very, very sensual image because of joining together these two things of the contact between parent and child and the swimming.
Yeah, it is what it is, and it is great. All the Hamlet scenes, how do you feel like they factor into this?
Well, the thematic parallels are clear, right? The son is Hamlet. Hamlet is dealing with the death of his father.
Yeah.
And, well, it's a kind of coming-of-age film, but in a resonance not with this movie, but with the last one, with The Dreamed Path. Critics have noted that there's this weird time gap in Hamlet, in that some scenes refer to him as being in his early 30s, but he's also just returned from university, so he's a boy and a man.
Yeah, well, that's great. That works for this. Although, it seems like this child is going to avoid the ultimate fate of Hamlet, hopefully.
I don't know how to feel about these bizarre zombie children reciting Hamlet.
Well, didn't it seem quite similar to the zombies performing Hamlet in Femme Douce?
No, it didn't at all, because...
They're not.
No, quite the opposite, actually, because the final scene, the death scene of Hamlet, like the final scene where everybody dies, the duel scene, is staged in both films, but I thought that one really worked well with the dissociated children to a much greater extent than it did. It was much more gripping and tense than the stupid shouting actors that the protagonist comments on or the heroine comments on in Femme Douce.
True, but in both cases, these are not actors that are going to get any kind of awards from the theater community.
No, but I think these kids are doing exactly what Schanelec wants an actor to do, whereas the performers in the Bresson movie are not doing what Bresson wants actors to do. I don't know what she wants to achieve with that style. I'm completely at a loss for what that brings to the film.
I don't know if it was absolutely necessary, but it didn't bother me either, and it did get us the Jughead crown.
Sure.
To be used in a different context.
I mean, I tried to grasp at straws, like thinking about child performers would originally have played Shakespeare's heroines, thinking about Camille Paglia lines like the gravitas of child actors and the stillness at the heart of tragedy and stuff like that, but there's only so much I can do with this.
This is definitely a film that shows us how intimately familiar most or all children are with tragedy and the darkness at the core of human experience, because they live in a family, they feel things along with their parents, and they presumably understand the impact, even if they don't understand all of the details or the social and political realities that govern human experience. They know how it feels to lose a parent or to learn what death is.
It's not what is the text doing in the film, it's what is this performance style contributing.
In some ways, I think it's just, this is how kids act.
The hell it is. This is how kids read lines, I guess.
Well, that's what I mean. That is exactly what I mean.
Yeah,
this is how kids act when they are in a play, not how they act when they are not in a play.
I guess it is the ultimate contrasting of theater and being that she's so interested in, because the children are just being in these scenes. They're not attempting to act or lie or perform, but then you have them delivering Shakespeare's poetry, which, by the way, this translation is by Schanelec and her late husband.
Oh, cool. The most interesting thing I can tease out of it is that when the kids are not trying to play Hamlet and read Shakespeare's dialogue, we see them registering the full impact of life's tragedy, but when they are performing the play at school, we see them struggling with the language that Shakespeare has conjured up to try to immortalize that tragedy or capture it in art. They're not quite up to that, but they certainly are up to feeling these universal emotions.
Now, quite aside from the Hamlet performance itself.
Although I think I was magnificent as the baby bear in grade 2.
You also played Linus.
Yes.
How good was that? You had to do quite a speech to play Linus.
I think I was pretty good
Deliver quite a speech. Maybe you weren't. Maybe you were just like these kids. Quite apart from the Hamlet performance, there are so many scenes that to me seem quite non-realistic from what I know of children. So many scenes of children taking care of each other. Not just the siblings, but in the school, there's so many scenes of kids just spontaneously putting an arm around each other. Or, which all seems to come out of that swimming pool scene from The Dream Path. And so it's like there's this terrible world of adult tragedy and fury and feelings of going insane in reaction to loss and stress and fear.
Falling upon the thorns of life.
But in contrast to this is this sort of beatific world of the children who are all caring for each other and are reaching out to try to heal the adults as well.
I liked it a lot.
Which, again, that sounds more annoying than it actually is in the movie, because it isn't done in a sentimentalized, Disney-fied kind of way.
No, because most of the time, just about 99% of the time when you see groups of kids or siblings portrayed on film, they're being nasty to each other. And I don't think that's realistic either.
Well, we've had this very discussion on this podcast with other media. That's what I've mostly seen in my life, is siblings being terrible to each other until they grow up.
Well, obviously,
it wasn't the case in my household, but only because I was very much older than my younger sisters.
I think certainly it happens, but it's not 100% of cases, and I think it's nice to get the reverse for a change. Idealized portrait of the solidarity of children. Why not?
Sure.
Why not? It fits.
Well, it clearly represents at least something in the auteur's psyche.
Yeah, and she goes out on that scene we discussed already as they walk into the water together.
It's almost like the adult part is shutting off and some child part that can still feel and can still heal and can still take care of things is turned on.
Wonderful.
Do we want to talk any more about her other movies before closing this episode?
We've done a good enough job on these, and our opinions were informed by all the other films that we saw.
Sure.
Maybe we'll revisit those specifically at some point in special episodes.
Well, they all certainly require more than one viewing.
Yeah, and we didn't do that today, so... Now, I loved them all. Highly recommend them all. I wasn't that taken with the student films, but everything else by Angela Schanelec I highly recommend to all of you out there.
Yeah, like I said, I have found them very interesting, although, as we just articulated, there are some elements of them that I don't know what to do with.
Sure. Onward to This Week in Cinema Going. Our last This Week in Cinema Going for a while, potentially.
So we almost got to the end of the Bressons. We only had...
Le Diable, probablement.
L'Argent left.
Those ones.
Are suspended. So what we saw this last week was LANCELOT DU LAC, Une femme douce, Gentlewoman, and Four Nights of a Dreamer. I don't know.
Quatre nuits, d'un rêveur.
Oh, well, very straightforward.
Yeah.
Two of these are Dostoevsky adaptations.
It's true. Dostoevsky's big for Bresson because Pickpocket is also adapted from...
Well, not really adapted, but it nods at Crime and Punishment.
Well, these as well seem very loosely taken from Dostoevsky.
Have you seen these, read these stories?
No, but I really doubt they're anything like this. Oisal Balthazar is also loosely based on The Idiot, as far as I've heard.
Good grief. That is very loose indeed.
Yeah.
So there is a version of Four Nights of a Dreamer done by Visconti. I think that's White Nights.
Right.
Well, that would make sense. They both have knights.
Original story is called White Nights.
Yeah, so that one may be more faithful. I don't know. I haven't seen it. Anyhow, we'll see what Bresson makes of it. So we watched... That's the order in which we watched these, but that is not the order in which they were made. LANCELOT du Lac actually comes after Une femme douce and Quatre nuits d'un rêveur. Femme douce is from 1969. Four Nights is from 71, and LANCELOT DU LAC is from 74.
Year of my birth.
So these are all, if you subscribe to that theory that I mentioned in the new book about Bresson, that his filmmaking changes after 1968. I have not read the book though, so I don't know exactly what the thesis is, how it changes. These are all the first films he made after 1968, that all-important year of bitter disappointment for any kind of leftist idealism in France.
And in America.
And everywhere.
Les 68 Arts.
So what did you make of, well, what are we going to do? We're going to go in chronological order or the order in which we saw them?
Chronological.
Chronological.
Yeah.
Okay. Then we're starting with Une femme douce.
It's retrospectively narrated by the grieving, agonized, narcissistic husband of a woman who we meet face down on the street after she has killed herself.
Actress who plays the wife is Dominique Sanda, who was a 17-year-old model at the time, but who went on to become a very prolific actress of both stage and screen.
She's magnificent in this movie.
Sure.
Not for the first time, not for the last time, we will see a Bresson character obsessing on a woman who is not quite an adult.
This seems highly related to Four Nights of a Dreamer.
Yeah.
Yes, that's true. It appears that basically all of his heroines from, I guess, Oisal Balthazar onward, and we also see there's many important teenage girls in Diary of a Country Priest, so from that point onward, most of his important female characters are teenagers.
Once Bresson got past 65, he never really thought about women who were adults ever again.
Nope. To be fair, most of his main male characters are quite young as well, though not this husband.
No, this guy is in his 30s.
And we don't get gratuitous butt shots of them.
No.
No matter how young they are.
No. He is a pawn shop owner and pervs on a young lady who is pawning off her last remaining possessions to stay afloat, and eventually manages to kind of, I don't know exactly, it's quite a crazy scene. I don't know what he does. He just somehow makes it a fact by saying that she must marry him. Performative language. This is going back to Stanley Cavell.
J.L. Alston. After having a lot of emotional ambivalence about Auhazard, Balthazar, and Mouchette, because they are so relentlessly bleak in their vision of humanity, I've actually kind of really been digging these late Bressons.
I love them.
Still, the first three are my favorite, by far, but I've been having a lot of fun with these. This I really liked. What I got out of it, and it's very enigmatic. It was slightly reminiscent of that Ackerman one, based on the Proust story.
La Captive.
La Captive, right. Slightly reminiscent of that. Also reminded me at moments of Hitchcock's Marnie. It's about a relationship in which a man sort of entraps a woman into marriage, and her attempts to resist him within the confines of that arrangement. And at the same time, it seemed to me that it was about a man who kills a woman by loving her.
Yeah, well, it definitely is that.
His love isn't very nice, and neither is Sean Connery's in Marnie. It's not nice love, but it's love, and he seems to kill her with it by the end. Because she does seem to acknowledge that part of the reason she can't leave this relationship is because of how much he loves her.
Right. No,
and she even makes an attempt at certain points to love him back.
Well, she has sex with him every single night for an undetermined period of time, and then it stops. And she seems to be really into it as well.
Well, there seems to be some kind of Bressonian, I mean, this is how critics have talked about it, a Bressonian binary in this film between the material and the spiritual, and she's really into the material side of their relationship. That's how he entices her to marry him, by offering to give her things. Clearly she's disadvantaged. But then they also really, as he mentions many times, even when their marriage is falling apart, they enjoy having sex.
Yeah.
But there seems to be something else she wants from this relationship that she can't get from it. When he makes that weird proposal when they're watching the monkeys, she says she doesn't want marriage at all.
Yeah, but he just makes it happen anyway. Their marriage really starts to go wrong because she does seem to be getting into it. It really goes off the rails and never gets back on it when they have their huge confrontation over her trying to redistribute wealth, basically. She says a pawnbroker should be helping anyone to get through life and buying things at inflated prices just to help people buy food. And of course, this guy is a scumball, your basic pawnbroker who is out to extract the most profit he can from his community, and absolutely shuts her down when she's trying to pull off this little scam, this sort of Robin Hood scam. That's where all the real bitterness starts at that point. I think she probably would have been really fulfilled and happy if he had made her an equal partner in the business and let her do these things if she wanted to with the business's money.
Sure.
But absolutely not. That is not how he conceives of marriage and not how he conceives of his business. It's his business.
And he also, on several occasions, to emphasize what a nasty character this is, gloats about his power over her. He talks about their relationship in terms of him having power over her and him delighting in that power.
Yeah, well, he needs it because he doesn't have any other way to hold her. But he doesn't really gloat about it in a way that he just seems to be ratifying what he believes to be a kind of natural condition between men and women.
Sure.
Now, he's wrong, obviously, but this is how he feels about it. So he doesn't come to it like it's a great discovery. He comes to it more as a matter-of-fact kind of item.
And there's all of this animal imagery, which also made me think about Marnie, where she identifies with the monkeys and she talks about all sorts of different kinds of animals that she reads about in books and seems to be interested in exploring their relationship. Like, how do you get from the amoeba to the soul or something like that, something along those lines.
Right.
She's definitely an intellectual of sorts.
Yeah, she is. She's already deep into literary and philosophical investigation when he meets her as a teenager.
But then there's that turning point. Something breaks in the relationship.
That's the break, when she tries to
No, but-
give an old woman lots of money for...
No, but I'm talking about when it kind of reverses back, when he has some kind of epiphany and, like, falls to his knees in front of her and says that he understands now that...
But he doesn't.
That he absolutely loves her and will do anything for her and et cetera, but that in itself doesn't... That just makes things worse for her, seemingly. That leads pretty directly to her committing suicide. Because she says at that point that I will try to be a good wife to you.
Yeah, and the only way to be a good wife to him is to kill herself. That is the ultimate message of the film. Like, she can't be a person. She has to be dead.
And yet, oddly, because he is the protagonist, I mean, I guess it's a little bit devil as a woman, as a faint analogy too, because you can see the flashbacks versus what he is describing and what he is narrating. You can see what a discrepancy. What a terrible person he is, and you come to understand more than he does what has happened to her, right?
Yeah.
But at the same time, precisely because he's the narrator, you do identify with him?
Well, I think he's just a regular guy. And being married to a regular guy in France in 1969 probably is worse than being dead. Or to realize what is expected of you in that marriage, you probably do have to be dead.
And we've seen frequently with Bresson, this is a continuation even of something like Ladies of the Bois de Boulogne, that the most important thing to his characters is to be free.
Yeah.
And some of these women, like Mouchette obviously, and this woman in a different way, her only way of being free is to kill herself.
Yeah. Obviously, in real life, this is not the solution. The solution is to just leave this guy and start a new life somewhere else. But in the terms the film offers, it does make sense, because she does feel like she owes this guy something. She is caught up in his own vision of what a relationship is. She does believe, rightly, that he loves her as much as he says he does, and she wants to be what he asks her to be, and she knows she can't, so she throws herself off the balcony.
Right? So that's that one. Sorry we spoiled it for you. Well, actually, it's spoiled from the beginning. So.
I mean, it's an incredible movie.
Yeah.
Nothing we said here would actually spoil the experience, I don't think.
Of course not. I certainly hope not.
No.
The next one is 4 Nights of a Dreamer. We're not the only ones. Well, we saw this at home before, because there was a Bresson retrospective before. I don't think it was a full one, though. Just a few years ago.
Well, this one didn't wind up being a full one either. Thanks, coronavirus.
Incidentally, when I was doing some further research on Bresson last week, I learned more about the intimate relationship between TIFF. They're doing this retrospective to celebrate their anniversary. I don't know off the top of my head what anniversary. The precursor to TIFF, the Ontario Cinemathèque, was responsible for doing a Bresson retrospective in which they had new prints made of all the films, and which then circulated globally. So TIFF has a very important background here with Bresson, which is why they're using this to celebrate their anniversary. 4 Nights of a Dreamer. Okay, so this is our second time viewing it. I liked it even more.
Oh, it really jumped up.
The second time. We're not alone in thinking that this is Bresson doing a comedy.
Oh, it's pretty damn funny.
Assume, like, everything I've read about Devil Probably and L'Argent does not lead me to believe that they are also comedies, so this is maybe the only one, other than there is some ironic, funny business going on in Ladies of the Bois de Boulogne.
Yeah. Well, I think Bresson always shows that he's got a pretty good sense of humor, but yeah, this one is...
I don't know if I agree with that.
Oh, I think so, but this one does seem to have been intended as mainly a comedy, although certainly it has its gut punches to offer.
Sure. And it does seem to be kind of in dialogue with a gentle woman, in that you get another young man with a Hitchcockian obsession with a woman, or another man. This one is younger.
This guy, I don't know, he's what, 21?
And it's very ironic toward the protagonist, as a gentle woman is. And his view of women and this particular woman.
He's more of the new generation coming up, but it seems to be saying these guys have the same problems as middle-aged pawnbrokers. We see him somersaulting through the flowers as he comes back from a ramble in the forest. But as he goes rambling around the city, he's just a stalker, basically.
Yeah, it's very interesting. So it seems like in his own mind, he is this
romantic figure.
Isolated romantic figure who falls in love with women in a pure-hearted, noble way. But the way it's filmed, he just looks like a creepy voyeur.
Well, it's pretty interesting because whoever he is, was he an actor at all? Or
There's
was
no
he just...
Wikipedia entry for him.
Yeah.
His name is Guillaume de Forêt.
Guillaume de Forêt.
Guillaume.
So Guillaume is the French version of William, right?
Ah, I didn't know that.
Bresson must have chosen this guy because you can film him from one direction or one angle or whatever he's doing, and he does look like a pure-hearted poet. Or you could just take a slightly different angle on him and he looks like just a complete weasel. It's incredible.
He has a handsome face for a normal person, but at the same time he holds his body so awkwardly that it is very easy to get creepy vibes from him.
Yeah, and Bresson doesn't spare us all the scenes of him stalking around town.
Watching couples make out, staring at women through shop windows.
They rush onto buses to get away from him. So this is our hero.
He spends the rest of his time in his artist studio.
Yeah, so he is an artist. He's a young painter.
He seems to be making completely ridiculous abstract paintings that literally look like a child could do it. And what he does is he records a little bit of something, maybe some lines of a work of fiction or some sounds.
I think he's just making this stuff up. It's his own little fantasies that turn him on and get him into painting or whatever else he's doing, stalking people.
He just likes the fact of having a recording device, basically. So he does his little snippet into the recording device, plays it back to himself, and that gives him enough energy to, do a few strokes of a painting. And then he lies down for the rest of this time listening to his own voice. There couldn't be a clearer representation of the fact that he's ultimately autoerotic.
Yeah.
He is in love with the sound of his own voice.
And the fantasies that he spools out for himself. On the first night, the first titular night of the Dreamer, he goes to the Pont Neuf. He's just wandering around town after a hard day's stalking. He sees a young girl planning to kill herself.
Right, she's going to throw herself off of a bridge. And he manages to stop this.
This may have been a fantasy that he's recorded for himself. The first one that we do get is not too dissimilar from this. It's about a woman who is trapped in a tower with an old man. He doesn't really know all the backstory, but he knows it's a woman in trouble. Obviously, he's got a lot of fantasies about rescuing women in trouble.
Well, Jonathan Rosenbaum, in a contemporary review that he did at LANCELOT du LAC, talks about how Four Nights of a Dreamer has a sort of medieval feel to it, and that this hero is a kind of pure-hearted knight. Now,
Le Château est bizarre.
Or one might think that he at least sees himself that way.
Yeah, he does see himself that way, for sure.
And this is a kind of medieval fantasy that he's having.
Yeah. And she's even kind of like a belle dame sans merci, because all he's doing, ostensibly, is helping her get a man back that she has lost. The man that drove her to suicide by not coming to see her when he finally came back from America.
But first they have a long discussion of each of their lives, starting, as is common in movies, with the man, with his story. And that's when we learn about how he spends his days stalking and recording.
And she's like, that's your life?
The flat yet hilarious deliveries of dialogue in this film have to be seen to be experienced.
Yeah.
And then she's basically like, shut up, stop pitting yourself, listen to me, I'll tell you my story.
Yeah.
And then we get her story, of course, being a woman is all about love. And she tells him about the tenant.
No, she's just as much of a weird fantasist as he is.
True. About the, I guess, boarder in her mother's apartment.
This complete goofball.
A goofy-looking intellectual.
Giant Coke bottle glasses and no affect whatsoever.
But the fact that she doesn't see him for a long time is what starts getting her interested in him.
He just, sneaks by because there's a long history apparently of her mother trying to set the boarders up with the daughter.
Well, the daughter says so.
That's what she says, anyway. This guy's not playing that game. He's living his own life, so she, by default, feels like she has to go in there.
At one point, there's a pile of books on the coffee table that the mother says that the boarder has left the books there for them. The only one that I recognized was Fanny Hill, which is an erotic novel, isn't it? Well, for the time.
Like an old-time risque novel, yeah, sure.
Yeah, but that's all I recognize.
I haven't read it.
There's also one called Irene, and I'm just trying to look it up now, and I can't see anything that would be a book of that name from that time, so anyone knows what any of those novels are, we'd be interested.
She finally just bursts into his room. He welcomes her with open arms.
Well, that's, like, very ultimately, but that is the end of the story. But what about the film?
Well, yeah, they do go to a movie. They go to a very bad-looking movie.
First of all, there's a whole sequence where he tries to ask her out on a date when they finally get a glimpse of each other, and he traps her in an elevator, which is out of Ladies of the Bois de Boulogne. That also happens.
Yeah.
But she manages to elude him, and in revenge, she speculates, he gives her and her mother tickets to, I guess, an opening night.
A very bad movie.
And I don't know what exactly. It seems like he's making fun of the new wave, but this is 1974, so it's quite a distance into the new wave.
It looked more like he was making fun of a typical action movie.
Maybe.
Like an American-style action movie.
But it definitely isn't French, isn't it?
Yeah.
Are they speaking? I can't remember if they speak or not.
Well, I think there's just grunting, really, because it's action stuff.
Right, and there's
there's a guy dying for a long time.
With extremely fake blood everywhere, and the guy kind of looks like Kurt Cobain, and then...
Yeah, he does.
Then he gets automatic weaponed, but he, for some reason, doesn't bleed as much as the other guy on the ground already, and pulls out a picture of a beautiful woman at the end as he's dying to kiss, and...
Yeah, it could be a parody of a new wave film.
Those were trying to, in their way, rip off American action films. Her scorn for it is absolute, much like the gentlewoman's scorn for the Hamlet performance.
Yeah.
Which can't say, whatever you think of Bresson's casting of and objectification of teenage girls, he gives them way more of a self-directed inner life than Woody Allen ever does.
Look, there are clearly some problematic aspects of Bresson's attachments to this age group, but he's been dead a long time, and all we have are the movies. Let's just focus on those. They also have their issues. A lot of them are rooted in more general gender dynamics, which are just exacerbated and maybe helped. It helps to show them in their starkest contrast by having the woman in these couples be underage.
Sure.
She has even less power.
Yeah, maybe so, but as I say, she may not have any power, but she definitely, in all of them, including Mouchette and Hazard Balthazar, has a very self-directed will.
Just in a society that takes all that power away, really, in any kind of social interactions.
So, that scene is fucking hilarious, and then she and her mother walk out on, well, I guess it's the end of the movie, but everyone else is still watching as they walk out. And as you say, ultimately, after some hot and heavy breathing nights where they nearly go into each other's bedrooms.
They sort of knocked on the wall, like in Un condamné à mort s'est échappé.
That's true, actually.
In their respective cells, tapping out little codes.
It is kind of hilarious that Bresson apparently thinks that what beautiful teenage girls do... Actually, this also happens in Flowers in the Attic, which was written by a woman, though not a beautiful one. He thinks that beautiful teenage girls take their clothes off and stare lovingly at their bodies in the mirror.
Well, that's probably what Bresson would do if he woke up in a teenage girl's body. Yeah.
Or just with a teenage girl's body. I mean, then I guess they end up sleeping together because the result is that she seems to feel like he owes her something in this relationship, or that she's shamed herself somehow. We do see them naked and holding each other, so clearly they did sleep together.
Yeah, they did. And he was leaving. He's got some kind of an academic placement in America, and she says, "Take me with you. I want out of this hellhole with my mother." I mean, it doesn't seem like that much of a hellhole, but she hates living there with her mother, and she wants out.
Well, later she says that maybe when she's monologuing to the dreamer, she talks about how maybe I don't really love this man, it's just that I wanted to get away from my mother, but it really doesn't matter at that point anyway.
No, at that point, things have progressed too far.
The next completely hilarious scene is this guy's art talk.
Yeah, when his friend, who he doesn't really remember, shows up. It's not a long movie, and about 10 minutes are given over to him getting ready to answer the door.
Yeah, he feels like... So it's clear that no one ever... He has talked about... it's a good self-quarantining movie. He has talked about how...
No one comes to see me.
And he never sees anybody. He just wanders around stalking girls from a distance all day long. So he's not at all expecting the doorbell to ring. But he seems to think that he has to show social graces if he has a visitor.
He listens to the doorbell as if it can't really be happening several times before he finally acknowledges that it is happening.
So this guy is really determined to have this conversation, even though they haven't seen each other since school or something.
Yeah.
So the doorbell just keeps ringing, and this is the thing that reminded me most of a Ackerman film, the comedy of The Duration, where it takes him so long to decide to open the door, then
and
takes
to clear away all of the detritus of his gross, solitary lifestyle.
And the specificity of it, the jar of jam, the half-eaten bread, the orange that he started peeling but didn't even start eating, the bottles of pop all over the place.
And then he replaces a lamp on the desk side table.
And he has to hide his art because he doesn't want anyone to see his unfinished work, or he's not ready to unveil it to the world.
And Bresson gets amazing comedy out of how many more canvases are lying on the floor, because you can't see the floor. He just looks over and he sees another one that he's got to turn around. So it goes on forever.
And then the guy comes in and immediately starts launching into a highly theoretical art discussion. It's almost like the monologue in I Was at Home, But.
Yeah.
Because the other person is just, like our protagonist, is just completely under-responding to everything that's said.
It happens in a flash. It's a blitzkrieg of theory, and then the guy looks at his watch and says he has to leave again.
And then as he's leaving, he's like, I'll see you again. And our hero says, promise? In a way that you can't tell whether he's being sarcastic or not.
Is that how they translated it?
Yeah.
He said sûrement, so that's like literally it would be surely.
Well, no,
or
but
really.
But, no,
that's basically what he's saying. Really, not promise.
The dreamer says really.
Yeah, he doesn't say promise.
And then the other guy says really.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Did you also read possible sarcasm into his tone when he said that?
Didn't
just
actually.
Incredulity.
Yeah, I think more incredulity.
Because with the word promise, that made it sound sarcastic.
Yeah, I don't. No, he didn't say anything like promise. Subtitles can be dangerous.
Okay, so all of that is hilarious.
Then the rest of it, a lot of it progresses the way innumerable movie romances and comedies have proceeded for decades at this point. There's a person trying to help another person get back together with someone else, even though they really love this person.
Right.
And it just doesn't go the way any of those other movies go.
There's also intrusions of diegetic music that are so hilariously goofy that I wonder if this is a highly specific French form of humor also present in Agnes Varda's One Sings, the Other Doesn't. Like these fucking ridiculous hippie.
Well, there's some bossa nova.
Singers and bossa nova.
Bossa nova on a boat.
Cruise guys.
Yeah.
And it's just utterly ridiculous. I have to assume it's on purpose because the rest of the film is so funny.
Yeah.
But yeah, the ending is quite heartbreaking, even though he sort of deserves, like in Ladies of the Bois de Boulogne, he sort of deserves what he gets for having bizarre illusions about women.
Yeah, and I think he actually will be fine. That's the other thing.
Because he's completely autoerotic, as we said.
He'll just go and
fantasize some more.
He'll say something else to his tape recorder, and it'll be alright eventually. Oh. But it hurts at the time. Marthe, that's the funniest thing in the whole movie. He records her name over and over again, and takes the recording out, and as he's revving himself up to see her, he just plays it on the streetcar, and people are looking at him like he's insane, because he is insane.
Yeah, he's so narcissistic that he doesn't even take note of the fact of other people existing around him and responding to what he's doing.
Either that, or he actually likes it.
Well, it does seem like a kind of pervy thing, like he's playing an orgasm in public.
It is, yeah.
And that leads us to...
I mean, it's really lewd.
Hilarious repetition of a name leads us straight into LANCELOT DU LAC.
Oh, you want to go right in there, eh?
Which, when I watched it, it didn't occur to me that any of it was intentionally funny, but the fact that it comes in time, right after, although several years pass, but right after Four Nights of a Dreamer, makes me think that maybe it's more intentionally funny than I was giving it credit.
Well, the Lancelot. That's him again.
It also starts out like a Monty Python sketch, and Monty Python and the Holy Grail was released the same year.
Right.
Well, technically...
A year later,
Technically 75, but they came out within months of each other. I mean, they completely have the same approach to representing these medieval battles. So we start with a bunch of knights in a forest, attacking each other with extraordinary violence that's also clearly fake.
Yeah, the blood, doesn't look like blood
The
at
head's
all.
popping out and blood gushing out of the head. It's almost like the parody of the violent movie in Four Nights of a Dreamer.
Yeah.
Except with knights.
Stabbing each other in the groin.
Yeah, it begins and ends that way.
Yeah. It's my least favorite of the Bressons, I have to say, but it was still really interesting.
I really dug it. I really was into it. I loved it. It seems to be totally abstract. It is this most totally abstract film that we've seen to date. There's really no protagonist. Everybody...
Gaston, though, is the protagonist, but actually Gawain is more interesting. Gawain.
Sure. Protagonist is that there are several characters given nearly equal weight. Lancelot, Gawain, and Guinevere.
Yeah.
Not the triangle you'd usually expect from this story. Arthur doesn't really mean anything.
No, he makes a few decisions here and there, and there's Modred as well, who is scheming.
There's a plot cooking in the background.
We all know that plot. Yeah.
Actually, the triangle here is between Gawain and Guinevere with Lancelot, because obviously Gawain loves him very much.
Well, hero worships him at the very least, yeah.
And the giant set piece is that tournament.
Yes, which is hilarious and very brutal. That violence does seem real.
Really odd editing, really odd camera angles, really odd use of repetition to create this, you have to see it to believe it, feat of just abstract pattern making. But the violence is at the same time very brutal and frightening. Like you said, what it reminded me of the most is the bumper car scene in Mouchette. There's some idea going on in Bresson about people being reduced just to units of force acting upon each other.
That's a good way to put it.
Well, I got that from one of the reviews I read, but I can't remember what. It might have been the Rosenbaum, I'm not sure.
Good steal. It all ends in the most nihilistic fashion possible, with Modred's archers just destroying all the knights.
Well, that is how the story ends.
Yeah, so...
This one would seem to be a good one for a post-1968 reflection, because it starts after all of the good part of the legend is over. They've gone on the Grail search, right? They've already had their wonderful times together around the round table.
Yeah, there's a lot of them dead already when it starts.
And they've gone on the Grail search, and a lot of them died on the Grail search, and also they failed, and now they've come back, and even that degree of camaraderie is over, and all that's left is to fight over a woman and kill each other and die.
And they do seem kind of lost Boy Scout troop or something, right? Like they definitely are not presented with any kind of mythic power behind them. They're a bunch of goofballs.
No, it refers to a time of myth and magic, but what we see is when all of that has fled.
Yeah.
I did a little reading on the film. It's full of anachronisms, deliberate anachronisms. The tents.
They didn't have tents.
The tents that all the knights live in, or if they do have tents, they didn't look like that, apparently.
Well, those are probably... nylon tents or something? Like they would have to be made out of hides or something.
The clothing that they wear is wrong. And did you happen to notice, like, speaking of abstract pattern making, that the knights have all of these multicolored neon tights?
Yeah.
Brightly colored horse saddles? Or blankets?
Right.
That are very visually striking in the film.
Yeah.
But that also don't seem right, or that certainly don't seem like other representations of Arthurian knights.
The knights are already anachronistic in the original texts, because it's supposed to be happening in 5th century Britain.
Sure.
But everyone always presents them as if they are high medieval knights. And obviously they're not. This is going back to a time when Britain was still occupied by Rome.
Already in the legend, it's not specific to the film.
Right.
There's also all those scenes of purely manneristic scenes of the knights trotting through the forest and answering questions, and before they speak, they have to raise their visor with a click. Like, everyone talks about Bresson's soundscape, and horse noises are extremely important to this, and so is the clattering armor.
Yeah.
Constantly throughout the film. I think this would be Bresson's idea of pure filmmaking, pure cinema.
You're probably right.
It also does have that theme of dismal disillusionment to give it some kind of gravitas.
It does. And futility.
But it doesn't have an interesting protagonist, which is what all all of his other films do.
Yeah, and Guinevere's not very interesting either.
No, not at all.
No. So... and that's unusual, because usually he has great female characters. She's just kind of there.
Well, she's like another version of the Grail. And the performances these actors give is going to remain to be seen, because we haven't seen the final two. But yes, all of his actors are being directed to drain their voices of inflection, but particularly his female characters usually have some kind of just sheer force in their personality that is working against this. But here, everybody is completely bland. They read their lines like the children are reading Hamlet.
Exactly, in the Schanelec.
In the Schanelec.
Yeah.
You know? And clearly that's what he wants, but it's a very different experience from his earlier films.
Yes.
But I dug it.
No, well, I did too.
It was quite a feat.
I didn't know what to expect. I didn't quite understand how Bresson would approach telling a medieval knight story, and I didn't guess it would be this way.
So we have one more film to talk about.
So this is Peggy Sue Got Married. We saw this. It was part of the Uncaged Festival.
Which is now suspended.
Yeah. So we missed Red Rock West, the first one. Peggy Sue Got Married was the second screening, and the rest are all coronavirus out of existence for now.
This was at the Revue Cinema?
Now, the Revue Cinema, I got a notification from them today. They are suspending operations for the next month at least as well. However, they also announced that they are ensuring that all of their employees will be paid during this time. So, major kudos to them.
Yeah, definitely. I'm not sure how many employees they have, but that's good.
Yeah, I think so. Hope everyone follows suit. I'm concerned about, well, myself and Elise and everybody else that might not have any work for the next month.
Which is a lot of people.
Yeah, we all need to live, so please pay us.
Time for that universal income check that could cut through a lot of red tape in the next few months.
At least this does give some possibility that at some future time when we are all able to go to the cinema again, you will get to see Vampires Kiss at the theater when the Cage Festival resumes.
Not if it resumes on Thursday nights and the screening starts at midnight.
Well, maybe it'll happen on a Friday.
That would be good.
We did get Peggy Sue Got Married. It was introduced by the pair of series curators, Alicia Fletcher and Brendan Ross.
We know Brendan Ross from his Neon Dreams series at the Royal. Well, we don't know him. We just know of him.
Yeah.
Alicia Fletcher is Programmer About Town.
Yes, we've mentioned her before. They together informed us that this was not an ironic screening.
Yeah, which we always appreciate.
Yes, because...
making that clear. Despite the fact that they're celebrating the wildness that is Nicolas Cage, these are not ironic screenings. These are performances to be savored.
Yes, and I think that Cage's performance in Peggy Sue Got Married, there's been variable reaction to it over the past 30 years or so. I think initially it was almost universally reviled and nobody understood what he was doing in it.
That was the day that we went from Four Nights of a Dreamer to Peggy Sue Got Married, which in terms of acting style is like going from 0 to 20.
Yeah, definitely.
Minimalist to maximalist.
This is Francis Ford Coppola.
So was this not successful at the time?
Yeah, it was. Not hugely
despite the fact of this performance?
Yeah, because everyone said Kathleen Turner is incredible. It's slightly marred by a very annoying... That's like the Malton Guide. I think I'm quoting even verbatim against my... Like, I didn't even realize I was. Marred by an incredibly annoying performance by Nicolas Cage.
So they told us, the programmers told us the backstory to this, which is that Nicolas Cage decided he was going to channel Pokey.
Yeah, Gumby's sidekick.
The Gumby series. That somehow this character just said Pokey to him.
Yeah.
Okay, we did a whole episode on this.
Yeah.
Well, not a whole episode. We paired it with something for our time travel original podcast.
I think Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind.
Oh, yeah, I think that might have been it. So, 2 good movies, so an episode worth listening to. I don't know how the sound quality is, but...
very early in our run.
And I told the story of having first seen it when I was 11 or 12, and having some of my first feelings of awareness of sexuality from watching this Nicolas Cage performance. Everybody is wrongly cast for age. Kathleen Turner is like about 32 or something in the movie, and she's playing a woman who's supposed to be about 10 years older.
And also 18.
Right. And Cage is he was in his early 20s in this movie and is playing the same couple of ages.
Yeah, he does a great job of looking haggard and middle-aged.
He is completely convincing.
Yeah.
Maybe less convincing as a teenager, in fact.
I don't know. I think he's pretty great in both. But, I mean, Kathleen Turner is magnificent in this film as well.
I really liked it when we watched it for our time travel episode, but I liked it even more this time. Actually, funnily enough, the last couple of weeks, if one has been following the news or Twitter, which I was following Twitter, I got addicted to Twitter during the US primaries.
Which now don't seem very important as the plague has descended.
Yeah, exactly. But between that and between everyone getting behind senile, like the Democratic Party getting behind senile Joe Biden, and then the entire world's going to hell in a handbasket after this pandemic suddenly became obviously serious, globally serious, we've all been feeling a lot of terror and uncertainty. It wasn't the Bressons, it wasn't the Mouchette and Au Hasard Balthazar that really focused that feeling for me, or really gave me an emotional response. It was this film. It just broke my heart with its gigantic emotional generosity. And I think the older I get, the more I will appreciate it, because the more powerful the nostalgia becomes.
Yeah.
Even just being a few years older than I was the last time we watched it made a difference for me.
Yeah. Well, it's always been one of my favorite films of the 80s, and it continues to be so. I was very happy to finally see it on the big screen, because I first saw it on VHS maybe a year after it came out in theaters. I wouldn't say anything surprised me about it this time. I've seen it so many times, but everything was just better seeing it on the big screen.
Well, I think the surprise for me was really realizing what acting powerhouses both Kathleen Turner and Nicolas Cage are, despite the fact that she hated him through the whole filming. Nicolas Cage doesn't seem capable of hating anybody. He seems like a completely lost, pure and lost soul wandering through a hell world, the hell world that we live in, and not quite connecting to reality. But she really hated him for this bizarre performance that he gave. But it works for their characters.
Yeah, it does.
For these loaded scenes that they play together, the most magnificent of them is, of course, the scene in the basement.
Yeah. I was thinking, did we both up? I mean, he spits and he's crazy in that scene. He has to reconjugate his verb about breaking up. And
he's doing something that is like a superimposition, because he is doing Adam Driver style method acting that is very emotionally powerful and affecting, and at the same time he's layering on top of that this caricaturing.
Yeah.
Right? And doing like both of these simultaneously, which is quite a feat to behold.
Yeah.
I don't really know another actor who can do that. Like, I know actors who can do one or the other, but
no, this stuff is deadly serious to the character, but is also hilarious.
And he does have this way, an arc I understood better in the film this time too, is that what reconciles herself to her life ultimately is realizing that despite how terribly he's treated her in recent years, that her husband does love her. There's no one like Nicolas Cage, especially at this age, because we saw it in Valley Girl too, for convincing you that he loves a woman.
Selling that sincerity. He's just a very earnest fellow all around.
Like, I think maybe my favorite scene of his is where he's walking the dog after...
Yeah, that's a great
after she's
scene.
rejected him and he's feeling really terrible the next day. And she just comes up to him and tries to start talking to him again.
Elvis is dead. This is Ajax.
Like, he's just so pitch perfect at conveying his total ordinariness in that scene.
It is one of the best scenes in the movie, for sure.
And yet, at the same time, conveying his hurt feelings. Like, I don't know what to say. He's just an absolute genius in this movie. And Kathleen Turner is too. She plays it as an adult and treats the men as children.
Yeah.
Because she is a 42-year-old woman, I guess, maybe supposed to be inhabiting an 18-year-old's. Like, they don't do anything with makeup or anything.
No, that's perfect. That's exactly the way to do it. It's more like a stage
performance.
Yeah.
In that regard. But the men are much, much younger than she is, that she is relating to romantically.
Yeah.
In terms of the narrative.
Michael Fitzsimmons.
She treats them ironically, right? The whole time, and yet also maternally.
And nostalgically. She's able to get into the space that she was in at the time. Not intellectually, but emotionally.
Her best scene, I think, is the glorious apex of the movie's emotional generosity when she finally gets that fling that she wanted with Mr. Intense Beat Poet.
Yeah, Michael Fitzsimmons.
Where he starts quoting his made-up poem about the rat puke and razors, and then she falls down and makes retching noises,
Yeah.
and it's just also giddy and
he's
ecstatic.
I'm sorry, I was trying to impress you.
And ironic and sincere. It's a really great movie.
If you've heard anything to the contrary, you've been lied to, so go immediately and get a hold of Peggy Sue Got Married.
And that's it. What are we doing next week, Dave?
Next week, we're going back to Jennifer Jones. So we'll be talking about A Farewell to Arms and The Barretts of Wimpole Street.
That'll be great.